Hello everyone, my name is Khemara. I'm a senior student at Georgetown University majoring in international politics. And today I'm going to present about my CMAP thesis under the title The Portrait of the Cambodian Genocide in National and International Media Narratives, which mainly highlight the differences between the national and international media in the way they represent ideologically driven devastating mass killings, as in the case of what took place in Cambodia. Thus, I hope that this presentation will be beneficial to the CMAP students as well as the audience who are interested in learning about the Cambodian genocide. So here is the outline of my presentation. I will be talking about methodology, explaining the different sources that I use for this project, and also the motivation behind my decision of choosing to work on this specific topic. I then will talk about the historical background and the cause of the Cambodian genocide, along with the explaining the definition of the genocide. Then the presentation will provide an in-depth analysis of the genocide from the national and international media perspective. After that, I will conclude my presentation by reminding the audience about the main point of my presentation and throwing my personal reflection toward the project. And the last slide of my presentation will be about the work cited. So this project is based on both primary and secondary sources and the data that I gather from the academic websites and the genocide survivor audience in Cambodia. The primary sources include my personal interview with my parents who are the Khmer genocide survivors. And for the secondary sources, the paper we relied on the journal articles found in the Georgetown University Library website and the international reputable newspapers such as the New York Times, BBC News, and the Independent. For the motivation part of the methodology, I really couldn't put a better picture than the picture of my parents, who is not only the crucial source of my project as the Cambodian genocide survivor who directly experienced the genocide, but also the main source of motivation behind my decision of working on this project. Born as the daughter of the genocide survivors in a small village of Cambodia, who often heard the painful life experience of my parents, who suffered so much under the regime rulership just to survive, I had always wished to conduct a research on genocide in order to gain a better understanding of the political cause of the genocide. However, with the limited access to education, the internet, and academic resources in my village, I was not able to do further research on these issues until I got a full scholarship from Reach Out to Asia to study international politics at Georgetown University in Qatar in 2017. Coming to Georgetown provided me with the foundation to understand political practice of the Khmer regime between the 1975 to 1979. So before I begin talking about the historical background of the genocide, I would like to give the definition of the genocide first. Cambodian genocide was known as the persecution and the systematics of killing the Cambodian people, the Khmer, during the period of 3 years, 8 months, and 20 days from 1975 to 1979 under the Khmer regime. The official name was the Communist Party of Cambodia that led by Pol Pot. It is commonly called by the local people as the Khmer or Pol Pot regime. This regime was heavily influenced by Mao Zedong, the Chinese Communist political ideology that was known as the main political supporters and the financial sponsor of the Khmer in the 1970s. It is with an estimate that 90% of the Khmer financial aid was from China. With this massive support from China, the Khmer were able to exercise its communist power in Cambodia even more effectively. And what were the causes of the genocide? So many scholars agree that the Cambodian genocide happened under the Khmer attempt in transforming the Cambodian genocide into what the regime called the Greatness Khmer Society, which refers to the greater society with economic development with purely classless society, where everyone live equally without the rich nor the poor. And to achieve its political objective, the regime believed that Cambodia should start with year zero, with the mean of eliminating the Cambodian people from any ownership rights by taking their personal property away from them, emptying the city, destroying the religion, and banning the Cambodian currency, and forcing every Cambodian individual to work collectively for the country on the farm with unquestionable command. Otherwise, they will be tortured. According to the BBC 2018 news, under the title Khmer Cambodia's Year of Brutality, under the communist policy, the majority of the Buddhist pagoda were destroyed. All the Bodhi monks were forced to give up their religious practice to work on the farm equally with other citizens. Many Cambodians, especially the urban citizens, could not adapt to this new hard working condition and become sick. Some people fainted and died immediately on the farm. The regime also had a policy to eliminate the educated people. I quote, often people were condemned for wearing glasses or knowing a foreign language, end quote. Because the regime was skeptical of educated individuals for their pose a high risk of standing against the regime policy. The practice of the new communist policy led to the deaths of nearly 2 million Cambodian people under the Khmer Rouge politics in just a short period of time. This massive number of deaths captured the attention of journalists and also from all around the world. However, there are different ways of portraying the Cambodian genocide between the local and international media. Specifically, the national media are more likely to capture the genocide through the lens of the survivor personal experience to show how cruel the regime was and how it affected the Cambodian people of the time. It is important to note that if the genocide survivor was the member of the regime, the information of the genocide is more likely to include the policy of the Khmer Rouge because they have close contact with the regime and therefore they know better about the regime policy more than other Cambodian survivors. An example of this can be seen through the interview between the VOA Khmer News, a famous local newspaper company in Cambodia, with Ms. Moon Yong, who was a former member of the Khmer Rouge Revolution and also a chief for Khmer Rouge leaders, Pol Pot. In her interview, Young mentioned that Pol Pot was very careful with sharing his political policy with other people. He trusted very few people. And when he trusted someone, he would appoint him or her with almost every important regime task and to important places that would serve the purpose of the regime. For example, because of the trust that Pol Pot had toward Young, she was not only allowed by Pol Pot to be his personal chief, but she was also appointed to be the Cambodian ambassador to China. However, if the news about the genocide is from the survival experience, the information does not have much thing to do with the political policy of the regime, but it is more likely about the starvation, suffering suffering that Cambodian people experience under the regime. For example, in the book First They Killed My Father, that is written by the Cambodian genocide survivor Long Eung, described the painful experience of how the regime transformed her family from the middle class to starvation, and how her brother died due to the starvation and lack of medicine. From this, we can understand that most of the Cambodian survivors choose to portray the genocide through the lens of their painful experience living under the regime rather than focusing on the political aspect of the genocide. To understand the reason why, I conducted an oral interview with my parents who are the genocide survivors and who directly experienced the genocide. I asked my parents whether the regime informed the citizen about its policy or not, and how much my parents were aware of the regime objective. They responded that, I quote, we were not aware much of what going on at the regime upper level. We woke up each morning, they came to our house to take our belongings, and the next morning they came to catch our sons to be the soldiers. Another morning, they came and told us that we could only wear black clothes, no other colors are allowed. We woke up each morning with shock and scare feeling without knowing which policy is coming tomorrow. End quote. This allows us to understand that the majority of the survivors were not aware of the regime policy, which made it difficult for the personal narratives to rise about the regime's goal that led to this massive genocide in the Cambodian historical record, unless they were from the regime member. On the other hand, the international media coverage seemed to cover the genocide under the political context by adding their personal political interpretation of the genocide to identify it as the failure of the regime rulership. The Western journalists and newspaper company used the Cambodian genocide as the backwards-looking policy. For example, according to BBC News, published in 2018, point out that the Khmer Rouge policy in transforming Cambodia into the Great Society is a wrong internal political ideology because it led to a terrible cost. The cost of losing nearly 2 million Cambodian people who could be a useful human resource to develop Cambodia. In addition to this, the international news also portrayed the genocide through the lens of human rights abuse. For example, the American daily newspaper New York Times, published in 2020, called the genocide of Khmer Rouge as the depiction of human rights of the human cruelty due to the terrific events that the regime imposed, such as starvation, forced labor, and executions. Another international news company, the Independent News, published in also portrayed the Cambodian genocide through the use of the human rights violation by expressing that there should be justice for Cambodian genocide survivors to help them to heal. One advice it suggested was to allow the survivor to. In conclusion, the Cambodian genocide is commonly known as one of the most terrifying events in the Cambodian history that resulted in nearly 2 million people dying in just a short period of time. This mass killing took attention from people around the globe and often become a topic of discussion when they talk about the genocide, although it is portrayed in a different way. Generally, the national Cambodian media tend to portray the genocide through the personal experience of the Cambodian survivor who live under the communist Khmer Rouge regime. In comparison, most of the international media coverage analyze and interpret the Cambodian genocide from a geopolitical perspective as a failure of the Cambodian communist rulership. And here is the source of my presentation. And finally, I would like to say thanks to my mentor, Professor Farah Uruj, for his massive support and effort in walking me through this project. I also would like to say thanks to the whole CMAP committee for organizing this such amazing program that allow me to learn not only about the role of the national and international media in analyzing the genocide of my own country, Cambodia, but it also gave me opportunity to learn about the learning culture of both university, Georgetown and Northwestern.